Today, we're taking a look at the story of 12 Strong. This story is based on a U.S. Army Special Forces team operating under the leadership of Captain Nelson. Just days after a nation-changing tragedy, a small team is sent toward an impossible mission. They are deployed to Afghanistan immediately after the September 11th attack, where the enemy has around 500 fighters and heavy weapons. Meanwhile, this team consists of only 12 soldiers. Despite being so heavily outnumbered, they are tasked with carrying out an extremely dangerous mission. What follows is a battle that seems impossible to win, yet failure is not an option. So how was this seemingly impossible fight fought? Let's begin today's story. The story begins in New York City, where a peaceful morning suddenly turns into screams and explosions. Terrorists hijack 4 passenger planes and crash them into some of America's most important buildings. Within moments, the World Trade Center is consumed by smoke, fire, and rubble. Thousands of people lose their lives, and the entire country is overwhelmed with fear and anger. Investigators discover that the mastermind behind this horrific attack is Al-Qaeda and its dangerous terrorist leader, Mullah Razan, who is hiding somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan. While a nation struggles to process the attack, another story is quietly beginning elsewhere. At the same time, a small and happy family is living its normal life. This is where we meet our hero, Captain Nelson. Just a few weeks earlier, he had taken leave from the army and moved into a new home, enjoying peaceful moments with his family. But everything changes the moment his attention turns to the television screen. The same horrifying scenes are being shown over and over again. As soon as Nelson learns about the attack, the anger in his eyes becomes impossible to miss. Without wasting a single moment, he cuts his leave short and heads straight to army headquarters. The atmosphere is already tense. Everywhere, people are scrambling as preparations for a response operation move forward. The country wants answers, and soldiers like Nelson are ready to act. Nelson approaches his superior, Byers, and insists on being included in the mission. But Byers flatly refuses because Nelson has no real combat experience and is not considered ready for the assignment. Hearing this only fuels Nelson's anger, and he leaves without saying another word. He then goes directly to his friend Spencer and tells him everything. Spencer carries the same determination to do something for his country. He immediately approaches his superior, Byers, with passion in his eyes and determination in his voice. What starts as a request soon becomes a fight for the chance to serve. He keeps repeating the same thing, that he wants to be part of the mission. For a few moments, the room falls silent. The decision hanging in the air could change everything that comes next. Byers sinks into deep thought, and after considering it for a long time, he finally agrees. He personally goes to Nelson and officially assigns him to the mission. But there is one condition. They have only until the next morning. After that, nobody backs out. As night falls, Nelson returns home. He tells his wife everything about the mission and the dangers ahead. Hearing this, fear is clearly visible in her eyes. But Nelson takes her hand and makes only one promise, that he will return safely. The next morning, Nelson arrives at headquarters with his team. Now the mission is real, and there is no turning back. There, a colonel briefs them on the entire operation. The mastermind behind the attack is Mullah Razan, who captured Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan several months earlier. But there is one man who has continued fighting against him. His name is Dostum, a local commander determined to take back his city. The colonel tells Nelson that if they want to win this war, they must fight alongside Dostum and his forces. Their success now depends on an alliance that could determine the outcome of the entire campaign. The mission is set, and Nelson boards a helicopter with his team, cutting through the darkness of the night sky as they head toward Afghanistan. Every mile takes them farther from safety and deeper into enemy territory. A few hours later, under the cover of night, the helicopter drops them between steep and dangerous mountain ranges. The soldiers step onto the ground, and from the very first moment, they can feel the silence and the constant presence of danger all around them. Soon afterward, the helicopter departs, leaving Nelson and his team completely alone. They remain hidden for nearly 3 hours without making a sound. Then, movement appears in the darkness, and 2 armed men begin moving toward them. As soon as the men get close, Nelson and his team move with lightning speed and take them down. For a brief moment, it looks like the mission could end before it even begins, but suddenly, they find themselves surrounded by 40 to 50 armed fighters. Every member of the team instantly goes on alert, fingers tightening around their triggers. Then, the truth becomes clear. These are not enemy fighters. They are Dostum's men. In fact, the colonel had already made contact with Dostum beforehand. The tension fades, but the dangerous journey is only getting started. After that, Nelson and his team begin traveling on foot through the treacherous mountain trails alongside the local fighters. After hours of exhausting travel, they finally reach the location where they are supposed to meet Dostum. The man they came to find is nowhere in sight, and uncertainty fills the air. After waiting for some time, the sudden sound of gunfire echoes through the area. Then, a convoy of riders on horseback slowly emerges in the distance. Dostum arrives with a commanding presence. His eyes are cautious, and his face carries a cold silence, as if he is carefully judging everyone around him. He glances at Nelson and his team, but shows no particular reaction. Without saying a word, he goes inside and begins eating. The truth is, he does not trust Americans at all. Nelson can immediately tell from his expression and behavior that this is a man who will not move forward without trust. Then, Nelson takes a small step and offers Dostum a bottle of liquor. Sometimes trust begins with a simple gesture instead of a conversation. After a few moments of silence, a slight smile appears on Dostum's face. This becomes the first step toward trust between 2 complete strangers. Dostum gives them 6 horses for the journey ahead, because in these mountains, vehicles are useless, and no other form of transportation can get the job done. A fragile alliance begins to form in one of the harshest places on Earth, but giving them 6 horses is also a test, because Dostum still wants to evaluate them completely. Trust has started to grow, but neither side is fully convinced yet. Because there are not enough horses, Nelson makes a difficult decision and leaves 5 of his men behind while continuing forward with the rest of the team. Meanwhile, we see Mullah Razan, the mastermind behind the attack. He is a man who places no value on human life. After seizing Mazar-e-Sharif, he has trapped the entire city under a shadow of fear. He kills people without reason, so that his terror remains alive in every heart. At the same time, he is holding a family captive simply because the head of the household old, had secretly been educating his daughters. Razan does not want educated people in his territory because he sees it as a threat to his beliefs. Then, in front of everyone, he shoots one of the women from that family. The brutality of the act is enough to shake anyone who witnesses it. As evening approaches, Dostum takes Nelson and his team to their next position inside a network of caves and decides that the attack will begin in the morning. Night slowly settles over the mountains. Everyone spends the night inside those caves, each person imagining the battle that awaits them. At daybreak, Dostum brings Nelson to the location of a small Taliban unit, but a surprising sight awaits them there. Dostum's army is mounted on horseback. What Nelson sees next will completely change the way this war is fought. Dostum's forces are mounted on horseback, while the enemy stands ahead with automatic machine guns mounted on trucks and supported by tanks. The odds are so uneven that the battle seems almost impossible from the start. As soon as Nelson understands the situation, he immediately contacts headquarters and requests air support. Within a short time, airstrikes begin raining down from the sky, forcing the Taliban fighters to retreat. Then Nelson makes a dangerous decision. He chooses to move even closer to the enemy so he can provide precise coordinates and make the strikes more accurate. But as he advances, Taliban fighters suddenly launch an attack against him. Gunfire erupts from every direction, and rocket launchers begin exploding around him. With explosions all around him, Nelson finds himself trapped in the middle of the battlefield. From a distance, Dostum watches everything unfold, but he does not help because he still does not fully trust Nelson. He believes it could be some kind of trick. Then, Nelson risks his life once again and provides another set of coordinates. This time, every bomb dropped from the sky hits its target. Within moments, the entire Taliban position is destroyed. As the dust and smoke settle, Nelson remains standing. In the distance, Dostum watches him, and a faint smile appears on his face. For the first time, respect begins replacing doubt. It seems that Dostum is finally starting to trust Nelson. One successful battle has changed the way both men see each other. After the mission is over, Nelson and his team return to the same cave. Silence surrounds them. But this time, the atmosphere feels different. Along with exhaustion, a major question is clearly visible on Nelson's face. Can Dostum really be trusted? After all, he had just narrowly escaped death. The next morning, Dostum is ready once again. He takes Nelson with him and moves toward another Taliban position. Once again, Nelson requests air support. Bombs fall from the sky, and this time many enemy fighters are eliminated. For a brief moment, it appears as if the battle has finally been won. Dust and smoke fill the air, and silence spreads across the battlefield. Dostum assumes the fight is over, and that is when he makes his biggest mistake. He advances with his men to inspect the area, but the enemy is still alive. As soon as Dostum moves forward, a sudden attack erupts from all directions. Automatic machine gun fire and tank blasts tear through the battlefield. Dostum and his men are completely overwhelmed. One by one, his fighters begin falling, and the situation becomes extremely serious. Defeat suddenly seems very close. The victory they thought they had secured turns into a deadly trap. Then Nelson sees everything from a distance, and without hesitation, rushes straight into the battlefield with his men. At this point, the fight is no longer just about the mission. Now it has become a battle built on trust. But the enemy force is simply too large, and eventually everyone is forced to retreat. Somehow, they manage to escape with their lives. During the battle, Dostum loses many of his men, and several others are seriously wounded. But the way Nelson risked his own life to stand beside him changes everything. Actions speak louder than promises, and Dostum sees that clearly. In Dostum's eyes, Nelson is no longer just a soldier. He has become a true ally. Slowly, the trust between them grows even stronger. Then, Dostum reveals a new plan to Nelson, one that could completely destroy the enemy's strength. The following morning, Nelson explains the operation to his entire team. Afterward, he contacts the second group he had previously left behind. He orders everyone to reunite. A short time later, Spencer and the others arrive on horseback. For the first time, the entire force is finally together. Now the whole team is united, and once again, preparations begin for an attack on the enemy position. This time, however, the enemy is ready and waiting. They have learned from their previous mistakes and are no longer exposed in open terrain. Instead, they are hidden behind hillsides and defensive walls. For a while, everything appears calm, almost as if the area has been secured. The team slowly moves downhill while Spencer watches every movement from a distance. With every step, the sense of danger becomes stronger. Once everyone reaches the lower ground, they begin searching the area. Then, suddenly, something moves. A single glimpse is enough to reveal that something is terribly wrong. The barrel of a gun appears from behind a wall, but by then, it is already too late. The enemy has been lying in ambush the entire time, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Slowly, they move their truck-mounted machine gun closer to the wall. The moment Nelson and his team get within range, a devastating attack erupts without warning. Bullets tear through the air from every direction, and explosions echo across the battlefield. Within seconds, many of Dostum's men collapse to the ground. The battlefield erupts into chaos before anyone has a chance to react. Fear begins taking over once again, and some of the men start falling back. Just when the battle seems ready to collapse, one man refuses to retreat. Then, Dostum grabs a pistol and charges straight toward the enemy by himself, a true leader who never backs down. Seeing him advance, all of his men, and Nelson as well, rush forward behind him. Now the battle is being fought with everything they have. Moments later, Dostum reaches the body of a fallen enemy fighter and picks up an RPG launcher. After a brief moment of silence, he fires directly at the enemy position. A massive explosion rips through the battlefield. In an instant, fire and smoke consume the enemy stronghold. After that, the brutal fight continues for hours. One by one, they eliminate every remaining enemy fighter and eventually take control of the area. Following the victory, relief and satisfaction are clearly visible on Dostum's face. In a battlefield covered with dust and blood, they have finally secured a major victory. Later, in the quiet of the day, Dostum stands beside Nelson and opens up for the first time. Looking directly at him, he quietly explains why he wants to kill Mullah Razan. For the first time, the war becomes deeply personal. The pain is clearly visible in his eyes. Behind his determination is a loss that has haunted him for years. He explains that before Razan captured Mazar-e Sharif, he brutally quickly murdered Dostum's entire family. His family had been the most powerful and wealthy family in the city. Once they were gone, the entire city surrendered to Razan's fear, and the people became trapped under his control. Somehow, Dostum managed to survive. On that day, he made a promise to himself. Either Razan would die, or he would. Since then, he has been fighting this war to free his people. As the days pass, Nelson and his team continue locating Taliban positions one by one and destroying them through airstrikes. Each victory brings progress, but every victory comes at a cost. Many of Dostum's men have already been killed in the fighting, and many others have been wounded. His strength is slowly fading, but Nelson is now completely committed to finishing the mission. Almost every enemy position has been destroyed. Only one final stronghold remains. Nelson immediately pushes for an attack, but Dostum firmly refuses because he knows that a direct assault in their current condition would be the same as suicide. He is a smart leader who understands the value of waiting for the right opportunity, so he withdraws with the men he has left. Now, Nelson and his team are alone. For a few moments, the atmosphere becomes incredibly heavy. The final battle is approaching, and every choice now carries enormous consequences. Nelson looks at his men and tells them that they are incredibly close to their objective. His words are simple, but they strike every soldier with full force. He says that if they turn back today, attacks like these will continue reaching their homes. Those words ignite something inside every member of the team. One by one, they step forward and stand beside him. The decision is made. They will fight this battle even without Dostum's support. They wait through the entire night, and as morning arrives, they move toward the enemy's final stronghold. Nelson divides his team into 4 groups and positions them around the valley. What waits below is far larger than anything they expected to face. The moment they look down, everyone is stunned. Inside the valley stands a massive force of nearly 20,000 enemy fighters. Tanks, vehicles, and weapons cover the entire area. This time, even the smallest mistake could destroy the entire mission. Spencer contacts air support and sends precise coordinates. Every bomb that falls from the sky lands directly on target. With devastating explosions, more than half of the enemy force is destroyed within moments, along with their tanks and vehicles. But despite the destruction, the war is far from over. But many enemy fighters are still alive. Even after the devastating airstrikes, the battlefield remains far from secure. Spencer is about to provide another target when something catches his attention. Around 40 to 50 enemy fighters are slowly approaching with their hands raised, appearing as if they want to surrender. Spencer signals for them to stop at a distance, but they keep moving forward. The tension continues building. Then, suddenly, one of the terrorists shouts, "Allahu Akbar." In the next instant, he detonates the explosive device strapped to his body. A massive explosion tears through the area, and thick smoke engulfs the battlefield. Spencer is caught in the blast and suffers serious injuries, but he is still alive. Then, Nelson looks into the distance and sees Dostum returning to the battlefield with his men. Just as hope begins to return, an even greater threat emerges. At that exact moment, the battle reaches its most dangerous turning point. Mullah Razan spots Dostum from a distance and launches an attack using his deadliest weapon, the BM-21 multiple rocket launcher. Dozens of rockets streak across the sky and begin slamming into different sections of the mountains. Each explosion shakes the ground, and many of Dostum's men are killed. Nelson quickly realizes that if the rocket system fires again, nobody will survive. The clock is now ticking, and failure is no longer an option. Without wasting a second, Nelson abandons his position and decides to move directly toward the weapon. Sometimes, the only way forward is straight through the greatest danger. But enemy fighters begin surrounding them from every direction. Bullets, explosions, and death spread across the battlefield. The team requests air support once again. Bombs begin falling, but this time, they land dangerously close, and several soldiers are wounded. Meanwhile, Nelson charges toward the enemy force on horseback. Dostum's fighters immediately follow behind him. Together, they push deeper into the valley, battling through every obstacle in their path. Then, a powerful explosion erupts, throwing Nelson from his horse. For a few brief moments, the battlefield seems to disappear into darkness. But Nelson is not the kind of man who gives up. He gets back on his feet and immediately takes down 2 enemy fighters who move into his path. Moments later, Dostum and his men arrive as well. At the same time, Razan's fighters are desperately trying to reload the BM-21 rocket system, but they are too late. Before the reload is complete, Nelson reaches the position and captures the deadly weapon. With the rocket system secured, the momentum of the battle suddenly shifts. Now everything has changed. The hunters have become the hunted, and Razan is running out of options. Mullah Razan jumps into a vehicle and tries to escape, but Dostum refuses to let him get away. The high-speed pursuit races through dust, gunfire, and chaos. Then, suddenly, a violent crash brings everything to a halt. Razan's vehicle becomes trapped in a ditch and can go no farther. There is nowhere left to run. Dostum slowly steps down from his horse. The only thing visible in his eyes is vengeance. He stands before Razan and without saying a word, shoots him. At last, he avenges the murder of his family. Soon afterward, silence settles across the battlefield. The war that consumed so many lives finally comes to an end. The dust settles. The fighting is over. A medical evacuation helicopter lands nearby, and the wounded Spencer is immediately transported for treatment. The remaining soldiers stay behind because one final objective remains: liberating Mazar-e-Sharif. When they enter the city, an incredible sight awaits them. People fill the streets, throwing flowers and celebrating their arrival. Joy, freedom, and relief are visible on every face because Razan's forces have fled the city. Dostum approaches Nelson. This time, there is nothing but respect in his eyes. He tells Nelson that he has changed not only his life, but the future of the entire city. Then he says that even if their countries become enemies someday, Nelson will always be his brother. Those words carry more weight than any victory won on the battlefield. Those words become the greatest victory of the entire war. Some victories are measured not by territory, but by the bonds forged through sacrifice. Afterward, Dostum returns to his city. Nelson buries a small piece of metal in the soil of Afghanistan stand in memory of the 3,000 innocent people who lost their lives in the attacks. For him, this was never just a mission, it was justice. Eventually, all of the soldiers return home by helicopter, where their courage and determination are honored. Later, Nelson arrives back at his house, where his wife is preparing for Christmas. The battlefield is finally behind him, but its memories will remain forever. Their eyes meet, and without speaking a single word, everything is understood. That is where this story comes to an end. If stories like this stay in your mind after the screen goes dark, stay with HOPKART Peru, because the most terrifying stories are the ones that never truly end.